Well, hello again. Here we are. This is our fifth of this set of videos. Just quickly covering some of the chapters of this book, Becoming a Contagious Christian. So now we're going to do our fifth session, but chapters 7 and 8 we're going to do this time. Chapter 7 is Strategic Opportunities in Relationships. Now we're shifting a little gear now. We've been a little more conceptual. Now we're starting to be a little more practical. And the key point of this is that ultimately Christianity and our faith moves through relationships. Yes, we have multimedia, and I praise God for all the video television programs and the power of internet and satellites and all the rest. But there's no substitute for relationships. Every study I've seen for 50 years says that somewhere between 75 and 80% of every single person who has ever come to Christ and joined the church, our church, Adventist church, any church, comes through relationships. And it started through friendships, family, some connection where someone's an advocate and says, this has meant a lot to me. Why don't you try it out? There's an old movie. I tried to show it in my church this weekend, and it didn't come on time. It's called Gospel Blimp. Old show. But essentially, this little group of people in a church got together. We should do something for God. They put a little money together and bought a used blimp. And they put a Bible verse out behind it, and they would fly it around over their town, and here would be this verse, Jesus saves, or other verses. Then they wanted to do more, so they packaged up little tracts, and they had baskets, and they would dump those out on people's yards, little bombs. Then they began to shout, like preaching from up there. People hated it. Then they heard there was a few Polish people, so they better add a Polish broadcast, and so they shouted out Polish. And it got into politics, and pretty soon the captain wanted to wear a big uniform, and it was a big deal. And one family quit. They just didn't like the smell of this sort of institutional shouting out the message. And they just began to be friends with their neighbor and had a dinner with them. And they won somebody, and the blimp didn't win anybody. 80% comes from relationships. Bill Hybels has a wonderful book called Just Walk Across the Room. And he tells a story in the book and on the video, but we can all relate to this story. He was at a breakfast one time, and his name was introduced. I'm Bill Hybels. Another guy was introduced across a table, African, with a Muslim name. Figured Muslim. But clearly this black man, Muslim man, wanted to see you after the meal. He had what is the connection? Afterwards, he said, I'm Bill Hybels, so-and-so. And he said, how do you know who I am? Oh, I said, I've been reading your books. I become a Christian. You become a Christian? Oh, I said, tell me the story. He said, I grew up as a Christian, nominal, no real connection, converted to Islam in my 20s. He said, I was at a party one time, all by myself, standing up against the wall, and a white man broke away from his group of all his friends and walked across the room and reached out his hand and said, hey, I'm Joe, what is your name? Found my name, knew I was Islamic, and he said, hey, I've always wanted to meet someone who believed in the Muslim faith. Could I buy you breakfast and you share with me what you believe? And he said, we met together for a number of weeks, and when it was all that over, I said, I've been telling you what I believe. Tell me a little bit about what Christianity is to you. And he gave me some of your books, and I became a Christian. All because someone was willing to leave his circle of comfort, his comfort zone, his friends, and walk across the room and became my friend. That's where it happens. The gospel goes through friendships that are natural, not contrived, not just heading out of a church and going door to door, sort of the Mormon, white shirt bicycle idea, but to have real friendships in the non-threatening in the real world, when people are not your project. There's a risk to this, the whole idea of going into the world. Sometimes it's called an incarnational theology. Jesus came into our world. He didn't just shout from heaven. He came down into our world. So we need to get into the world. Well, how far do you go into our world? There's a book by Roger Dudley called The World, Love It or Leave It. How far do you go in engaging with our world in order to connect to it and to be in touch with it? Do you watch all the movies? Do you go to dances and listen to the music and tell the jokes and laugh at the jokes and all the rest? Or there are some boundaries that we should be careful of. In the world, but not of the world, John 17. How far do you go in accommodating to the culture? Missionaries would go down to Ethiopian church and make converts in Ethiopia. And they made everyone be in churches like their churches from Scotland And their hymns and their clothes and their stained glass windows and pews, the only part they allowed it to be African was the offering, where they could music and dance and so on. And over time, it became about 45 minutes of the worship service was bringing their offerings because they could do it in their culture. Acts 15 says, don't make it hard for people to come to Christ. How far do we go? In our music, in our lifestyle. You know, I had an associate pastor before, Pastor Sam Lenore. Incredible how hard he worked to stay in touch with his culture. As he became closer to 40 years old, he had to work even harder to know the music and know what kids were saying and talking so he could speak in language and in their world. How far do you go? Jesus was right in the world with people of the street, and they accused him of being with the drunkards and sinners, that anything goes. Jesus is with these people, but without taking on their sin. 2 Corinthians 6:17 says, come out, be separate. Babylon, it says, come out of Babylon. 1 John 2:15-17, you know, friendship with the world is enmity with God. Friendship with God is hatred of the world. It's either or, one or the other. Make a choice, no neutral ground. But at the same time, we have to build bridges over to real people. And so I'm going to tilt on this idea that we need to walk across the room. We need to know people, close proximity, know them, be with them, natural friendships. I just encourage you to take out a card of paper. We pass it out in church. And to just take a few minutes and think of people that you already know. Family, friends. And just begin to say, I'm going to pray that I can impact these people. And use the friendships that you naturally have, people that you see. Number 8, chapter number 8 is very similar, rubbing shoulders with irreligious people. You can spend all your time with the religious people of the world. And I love them. They are my friends, and my world is the church. But you also need to hang out with the renegades. Not just the religious, but the renegades. The world of the renegades. People who don't know God. Matthew, when he was called to Christ, he went and invited all of his friends to come to a party, and invited Christ to come to that party. So Christ could meet the renegades. Not just the religious people. Christ wants to know the renegades. And so can there be a time when you get the people over to your world and have real friends in real fun times? And I've gone to many of these, and people give me a chance to meet their friend. This is my friend. Someone had a friend of theirs in church this last Sabbath, and said, this is my friend. I brought him to meet you, Pastor Dan. And they want us to meet. And then I can take it from there maybe. I've had people who are dating people out of the church, and they'll say, this is my boyfriend, Pastor Dan. And we'll have Bible studies with them. Real friends. Who should you hang out with? One, people you know. Invite them to hang out and watch the Super Bowl with you. Go to golf with you. Have the kids on the block, all the kids on the block have a part. People you already know. People that are in your world. Those are people. Rub shoulders with irreligious people you already know. Or maybe people you used to know. And you've kind of left them behind. As you got involved in the church and more active, you left them behind. Go back. Write them a note. And send them an email. Just say, hey, how you doing? And get reconnected. Or maybe there's some people you would like to know. You see them at the store. You see them in a restaurant. I ate in a Thai restaurant this week and got to hang out. I'm going to go again this week. How are you? I got their names. How are you? How are you? And I want to get to know them and have them be my friends. And then I'm going to invite them to church someday. And I'm going to say, hey, we're going to do a service. I think maybe it'd be good. You'll like it. Rub shoulders with irreligious people. Make some friends for God. Jesus says, I have called you friends. He was friends with us. Go find some friends for God's sake.